My name's Jack, N7JP. My normal QTH is Whidbey Island in Washington State, about 30 miles north of Seattle. And I was part of an expedition team that went to Palau in November, operated as Tango 88 Whiskey Alpha. We're all members of the Western Washington DX Club, and we kept it as a very small group. And I heard Adrian speaking last night about how he got into DXing and started having to do his own trips just so he could get out and make these DXpeditions happen. Well, the same thing for our team. Consisted of 5 members, again, all of the Western Washington DX Club. 3 of us were brand new to doing a DXpedition. One of the things that our trip showed, no matter how much and how well we planned, things happen and you need to be prepared to overcome and adapt. And our trip to Palau turned into 2 popular TV shows from CBS, MacGyver, with all the things he had to put together, and Survivor. So that's what we started terming our trip as. So here's myself. We all brought something different, skill set to the team, complemented each other very well. We got along very well, which made it very nice. Some of the larger expeditions, maybe team members don't get along so well, but you have to work together. Brian, N9 ADG, he was our IT guy. He had been on a previous DXpedition to Mellish Reef. And as I say, we had ran into problems and people think weather was our big issue. Brian was the first issue that we had. The night before we were to leave for Palau, he had a family emergency and could not physically go with us to Palau. So that dropped our team from 5 members on site to 4. Brian was still a very active member of the DXpedition. We had Wi-Fi access where we ended up operating from. He was able to remote in and actually operate FT8 for us. And actually, Brian is a developer with the WSJTX team, and so there were some things that happened while he was operating FT8 as the Fox that he found in the program, or in the software, found issues with it, and there's some things later in the presentation I'll talk about that he had fixed in the program for Fox Hound mode. We had Rob, N7QT. Rob's a very experienced DXpeditioner. This was like number 24, 25 for him. He's been on several big ones. And when we got all done with this trip, with all the trips he's been on, he said this was probably one of the hardest ones he had done. And he went to South Orkney, Ducie Island, and those were pretty tough trips for him. And he said this was probably one of the tougher ones he had been on. Robin, WA7 CPA, as you can tell by her call sign, she is a retired CPA, so she became our logistics and financial person for the team, which was a very big benefit, both for the finances and the logistics, because we had to ship equipment and she was on the phone working for shipping companies for us. And then our last member is Justin, K5EM. Justin is very efficient with working with mapping, working with Google Earth, and so he was able to survey our site before we even left Seattle to come up with an antenna plan and how much coax we were going to need to help put things together. So you might ask, where is Palau? Well, if you don't know, it is west of Micronesia's. It's north of Papua New Guinea and east from the Philippines. The map on the left shows the country of Palau. It's actually a whole bunch of islands. I can't remember the full number of islands that are there. The main portion is in that red box. That's where most of the population is. That's in Koror. That's where their capital city is. That's where most of the activity is. That's where we were supposed to operate from. If you look at that map, you'll see a circle to the northern end of that big island. That's Babeldaub Island, and that's where we ended up. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the azimuthal map there on the right, or your right-hand side there, shows the center of where we were at and shows our what directions we had to be to go to North and South America and Europe, and they're about 90 degrees apart. So as we started planning our trip, we started planning back April of last year, and we found a resort high on the hill outside of Koror, kind of a high point, had great sweeping views going both towards Europe and North and South America. We made reservations there, so Justin got busy on his mapping software, found out where we could place antennas, came up with an antenna plan, So we decided to take two K4KO hex beams, one to use primarily to Europe, one for North and South America. We wanted to get the low bands, so we planned for a 160 antenna. We shipped two big step-IR antennas to use for the lower bands as well. Three amplifiers, two of them were 1.5 kW, and then we took a KPA 500 with us. We shipped all of our equipment. We planned for what we were going to do with the antennas and equipment, and we shipped everything on that list there except for the radios. We carried those on the plane with us, but everything got shipped by ocean in August. We dropped our stuff off the shipping company in August. First part of September, we decided that, hey, we might need a couple extra days. So we bought our plane tickets. We were there longer. So we called the resort to find out or to ask about extending our stay by a couple of days, and lo and behold, they lost our reservations. Nothing in their records. And they couldn't really accommodate us. They could accommodate us for a few days on the front and a few days on the back, but we were going to have to move out, go to a hotel downtown Koror, spend a few nights, and be able to get back up there to operate. So that was no longer an option for us. So then we started scrambling, trying to figure out where to go, because our stuff was already on the way. It was someplace in the ocean heading to Guam to get to Palau. And we had our plane tickets that were non-refundable, so we were going on a trip to Palau, whether we could operate or not, assuming we could find a place. But we got busy, and thanks to some YouTube videos we'd come across, we found a couple of operations that had occurred on the north end of Palau Island, in this place in the Chol Village community, their Typhoon Center, also known as the Bai. So Robin got to work, got on the phone, contacted a resort that's a half-mile away from this location. They had rooms available for us, could accommodate us. We said as a team, let's go ahead and book it. Of course, they wanted a huge deposit, so we made that deposit. And then we found out we needed somebody to negotiate with the high chief of the area to get access to use the Typhoon shelter to operate. And that happened to be Arlene, who was the owner of the resort we were staying at. So this was where we stayed, M&A Resort. The top picture there shows of the beach, the private beach we had access to. If we'd stayed at Carolyn's Resort, we would not have had beach access. The beaches in Palau are, for the most part, private. So you have to stay at a resort that has beach access. That bottom picture is an aerial view that Justin took with his drone, shows the beach down there, and then in the upper right-hand corner of that picture, there's a little red circle that came up, and that's where the Bai is. So the Bai is on top of the hill, again, with great views looking both towards Europe and North and South America. And it was fairly close to where we were staying. So we were pretty excited about that. Unfortunately, as we started looking at some more YouTube videos we come across, we found out there might be a potential for a noise issue operating at the Bai, particularly on the low bands. So Rob reached out. We found a local ham there in Palau, Gary Shirk. He's Tango 88 Sugar. Some of you may have been contacted. He's been operating FT8 here lately. But Rob got a hold of Gary. Gary volunteered to drive around the northern end of Palau Island. He went up with a shortwave radio, was checking for noise around the Bai for us, and sure enough, he said, yeah, you've got noise, but I can't pinpoint where it's coming from. Well, DX Engineering came to our rescue. They shipped a ultrasonic noise finding device to Gary, expedited shipping. And Gary knows one of the engineers from the power company, so they've spent a few days up there prior to us arriving to see if they could locate the problem and potentially fix that for us. We arrived in Palau and arrived at M&A Resort late in the evening on the 1st. And we knew going in that Gary had not been able to locate the actual issue of the noise. So Rob and Justin got up early in the morning of the 2nd, went up to the Bai with an SDR radio and a loop antenna, and sure enough, there was a noise issue there. The power company also sent representatives up on the 2nd when we were there. And there's more to the story here, but Palau really became a location of needing to know somebody that knows somebody. And it turned out that Arlene was a big power broker on that end of the island and had contacts all the way up into the high government for Palau. And she got on the phone with the power company and demanded that they send engineers up to help us try to locate and fix the noise issue we were experiencing there at the buy. So they came up the morning of the 2nd to help us, and Justin and Rob went out with them with the noise finding device that DX Engineering had sent them, and we found locations of noise. One of the spots that was noise was underground in front of a residence, and the island of Palau. When a family member dies, you just take them to the front yard, or that's one of the possibilities you can do. That's where the noise was down underneath a family member's burial site. So that was going to be a no-go to dig that up to try to fix that problem. The other thing that was going on the 2nd when we arrived there, we had to get our equipment from our shipping company. And initially when we shipped out of Los Angeles, it was supposed to go to Carolyn's Resort in Koror. So it was already at sea. We knew we were moving locations to a northern location on the island. And guess what? We had to pay a lot of money to get change the shipping location. But it was arriving at the buy the morning of the 2nd. We had to be there to collect it. We shipped 1,750 pounds of equipment, and we put it together in 33 containers. Well, they listed it as 33 containers. So some items, like tables, each individual table was its own container. But we'd shipped these Costco bins that were filled with coax tools, staking equipment, everything we thought we could possibly need. So during our noise testing on the 2nd, we found that there was going to be noise issues, particularly in the lower bands. We thought, you know what, maybe we can get away with the upper bands from the buy, because the buy was a nice location. It was air conditioned, had indoor plumbing, it had wiring for our amplifiers in there, and so it was going to be a nice location. So we thought, let's try putting up a Hexbeam and seeing if we can't operate the upper bands from the buy, and then we'll work on a plan to go to a remote location to do the lower bands on a few nights. So we did set up the Hexbeam, and unfortunately, I don't know if this, all right, the video doesn't work, but Rob and Jen, we got the Hexbeam up, we hooked up one of our K3s to that, and we had S9 noise level across all of the bands. So it was really going to be unusable for us at the buy. So we decided that, So we decided, hey, let's try down by the resort. We've got the 2-stepper big IR antennas in our equipment. Let's try setting one up down at the beach and see if we can't make something happen from down there. The problem with operating from the resort down there, we had a big hillside blocking us to Europe, so it was going to be mainly North America, South America, but you know, making QSOs, that's why we went there. We were going to do what we could to start making some Qs. So we spent, Rob and Justin spent the afternoon putting together the big IR, and lo and behold, it's not coming, the audio's not coming through. Lo and behold, we still had big noise problems even down at the resort. So we had to change our goals. We had no place to operate from. We wanted to find a place with the lowest possible noise that we could get. That became our #1 goal. Sleep kind of went by the wayside. We had to stay up and try to get this sorted out as best we could until we came up with a plan, and we also decided we can't give up. McKinley and Arlene, they were a big help in making our expedition become successful. As I said, Arlene was a big power broker for the northern end of where we were staying. She negotiated with the high chief. They also own a big construction company up there, and McKinley rented us a generator, rented us his truck. Now, mind you, I said rented, so we were paying for all these things that we were needing extra, and they are more than willing to help us. When we needed a generator, they said, oh yeah, you can go buy a generator here, but we'll rent you one. And what we figured out is they went down and bought the generator, rented it to us. So that's what happened with that. But yeah, they were a very big help. And if it hadn't been for them, I would have had a very nice 2-week vacation in Palau. So on the 3rd, we spent quite a bit of time driving around the northern end of Babeldaob Island. You can see all the numbers there. We started out, #1 is where the buy is located. #2 was our resort. And we went to all these different locations searching for low noise and places we could set up our antennas. And we ended up where that red number 9 is, which is actually a very historic site for Palau. They get a lot of visitors there, and they have these stone monoliths that are throughout their jungle area, and they have little areas that are opened up with park benches, and people come there to reflect on these stone monoliths. And it's very similar to the statues on Easter Island. So it's a very historic site for them. We got there, we found it low noise. There was still noise, but it was lower. It was going to be acceptable for what we were trying to do. Here's a picture of the location. The picture makes it look flat. It's more of a hillside sloping down towards the water, but we had a great view. This is looking east towards North and South America. There's 2 picnic shelters there. The one we used for our QTA, our operating shack, and the other one we used for storing our equipment. The downside to this was like going on field day. No longer had any running water, no toilets, no power, no air conditioning, and we were exposed to the elements. But again, it was a very fun location to operate from. However, it required negotiation with the governor of the area. Again, McKinley was crucial in this. Arlene, that was one contact that she didn't have, but McKinley did. He was friends with the governor. He arranged a meeting between Rob and the governor. So Rob got together on the afternoon of the 4th, the afternoon of the 3rd, and tried negotiating for access to the site, and the governor wasn't having it. He didn't understand ham radio. He didn't understand what Rob was asking of him. So he really wasn't buying into it. Fortunately for us, the licensing agent in Palau goes by the name of Jonathan. Turns out he was good friends with the governor. So Rob quickly got Jonathan on the phone, handed the phone to the governor. After a few-minute conversation, the governor had a big smile on his face, hung up the phone, understood, and says, how much will you give me? And so they negotiated a price and gave us access to the location. Again, it's really, knowing somebody who knows somebody is a big help. So we finally were able to unpack our gear on the 4th. Again, all this happened with the negotiations on the 3rd. Now we had to get our equipment from the buy, which was 5 miles away from where we ended up operating. We had 1,700 pounds of equipment, 33 bins, and we had a small rental van. That was gonna be a lot of trips. McKinley came through, rented us his flatbed truck, his crew, and they moved all the equipment from the buy up to this new location for us. So finally, on the 4th, we were able to start putting our antennas together. We were waiting for a generator. Now we had to put together our power lines for the generator, none of which we packed. So we had to make an hour drive down into the city of Koror to go to the hardware store to try to buy all the stuff we thought we were gonna need to put together our power requirements. The other thing that McKinley gave us was use of one of his laborers for the entire expedition. He actually came on site and spent 4 to 6 hours a day with us and helped us around the camp, getting things set up that we just didn't have enough people to do with. So this is what our site ended up looking like. Again, the picnic shelter on the right here is the one we used as our operating shack. The one on the left, we stored our equipment. We ended up placing one of our hex beams off the back corner of our operating shack. The other one went between the two. We put one of our big IRs down below. There's kind of a little plateau out in front of us. We had room to put that down along with 32 ground radials for that antenna. And then our 160 antenna eventually ended up behind us on the hill there. That's a 26-meter spider beam pole that we put up. Didn't go up the first day, second day, or third day, but we did finally get it up on the air and start making some QSOs. So you can see on the little inset picture on the right there what views we had towards North America and Europe. Europe had a little bit of a hillside, but it really wasn't a problem. And North America, we were just all salt water all the way across. Again, planning, we had to plan when we figured out where we were going to put our antennas. We actually had to plan on what order we were going to put them up because they kind of got in the way. And I hopefully have a video here to show you. So the first one, we put together one of the hex beams up on the flatter area that we had, and then we had to hike it down and around the hillside. to bring it around to the other side of the shack here and put it up. This antenna takes a few more people. It's a little more work, but once it gets up in the air, it's a great antenna. Not something you can pack to take with you on an airplane. You really need to ship it. That view you have right there that's looking a little bit north of where we pointed the beam to go to North America. As you can see, there's 4 of us there working, trying to get that antenna up. That pole, put it up at 33 feet for us. Fewer people were needed for the big IR, so while Justin and Robin were putting up the big IR, I was busy up trying to wire up our generator so we had power and we could operate. We ended up with our station, we ended up with 3 K3 set up. 2 of them side by side were station 1 and 2, and the third one there we ran as a spare station with the hopes if somebody wanted to have a few more hours of operating time, they can come in and do that. We had an amplifier on each one of our radios along with a computer, and they were all tied together we had a Wi-Fi hotspot there in the shack for internet access, which allowed Brian to remote in our evenings, daytime in Seattle, and operate FT8 for us. Again, we rented a 6,500 watt generator from McKinley. I should say we bought a generator from McKinley that we left behind, but he did supply us with a 55-gallon drum of diesel. Well, he brought us the drum, we paid for the diesel. The diesel is not like diesel you get here. You know, when you pump, if anybody has a diesel truck, when you pump diesel, it's nice, clean, clear, fairly clear green color to it. This stuff was black and chunky. Fortunately, we had shipped a filter that is capable of filtering out water and particulates. We had shipped it with our equipment because we had shipped a gas generator, 3,000 watt gas generator for use at Carolyn's to run one of our amplifiers. We didn't think we were going to get enough power out of her rooms to run our flex amplifier. So fortunately, we had the filter there, which helped us make sure we were getting that diesel as clean as possible. We had everything all set up, ready to go, start operating. We had the big IR up, so we put it on 80 meters. And lo and behold, noise that we didn't find with the loop antenna and the SDR showed up on the bands, particularly the over-horizon radar. It really wiped out the 80-meter band for us. We did try operating CW on 80 meters that first night. We made a few contacts, but the noise level made it very difficult to pick out any weak stations. All we could pick was the strong of the strong. So we actually shifted to FT8 on 80 meters, and then when we got our 160 up, that's all we could do was FT8. So finally, we were able to get on the air on the 4th. You can see we were still smiles. We were starting to make some cues, which helps broaden that smile a bit. So finally, on the evening of the 5th, we finally finished up setting up all of our antennas, got both Hexbeams up in the air. We were starting to operate. We only had the 160 antenna left to put up. We were working on that, but we were operating. The morning of the 6th, remember this was a trip of troubles. The morning of the 6th, Robin woke up. She didn't feel too good. So she took a COVID test, tested positive for COVID. So she ended up being in her bungalow until the 10th of November. So that put us down to 3 people to operate radios and finish putting up a 160 antenna, which was a chore. So that was another shock to the team, one of those other kicks in the groin, if you will. On the 7th, Justin and I were working on getting the 160 antenna up, and we had a visit from Gary. He wanted to see what was going on, and he saw what we were putting up for 160, and he was trying to figure out how he could get out of camp with that under his arm to take home with him. We told him no go. But Justin and I spent a good portion of the day on the 7th getting that antenna up in the air, and Rob came back up because he heard Gary was in town. The other thing that happened for Gary is he brought his radio and his computer there, and we helped him get his radio talking to his computer for FT8. So on the 7th, we got our 160 antenna up. I'm going to kind of speed up here because I'm running short on time. This is a big story. One nice thing about operating in the jungle and having somebody local there that knows what they're doing, we had fresh coconuts. You bring in coconuts, open them up for us, and it was great. So a lot of you may have heard about our weather issue known as the typhoon. Some of you may have seen the video on Twitter the day it happened. But here's a brief video of it. I apologize, the audio is not working there. Justin had some great commentary. The video that Justin took during this time, the storm rolled in on us. He was able to get some video when the storm first started. The video shut off. Now you're seeing it. Our entire shack is blown apart. We've got water running in. We covered everything up with tarps as best we could. It was not a fun experience, but our antenna stayed up. Our 160 took a beating. We had to repair that, and it took us a few days to get to that. Come on. Sorry, I have to. I apologize if the slides weren't advancing for me. Is that back up there now? No? All right, there we go. So we took our equipment back to the resort, opened up all our K3s, dried everything out as best we could. Took a few days, or it took a day to get it dried out. The other issue that was going on is the resort was losing power, so we didn't have use of the air conditioner. I'm going to skip over this video, but we had a mechanic. We got a phone call saying there was a problem with our generator. We need to send out a mechanic to look at it. Again, this is the generator we rented, and the mechanic proceeded to blow up that generator. So now we had wet equipment that we had to set back up, and we have no longer any power. I apologize, this thing is not wanting to advance for me. So fortunately, I said we shipped a generator. It was a 3,000 watt generator, gas powered, that was able to do 220. McKinley found another generator in the back of his yard that was a diesel generator. It was only capable of 120, so we had to rewire everything. We were finally able to get back on the air on the 10th after drying everything out, getting our power sources or needs back up and running. And it became a race against the clock to start putting cues in the log. The 14th arrived. It was time to start packing up equipment. Just like anything else, field day or otherwise, you pack up your equipment in the rain. It was the same for us. The one thing that we were able to do, all right, I'm just going to stop with the video or with the slides. Sorry about that. The one thing we were able to do tourist-wise, we were able to go visit a site in Palau that supposedly Tokyo Rose operated from during World War II. And so we were able to see the remains of the towers, her operating QTH, her generator building. It was very interesting. We met Gary the night before we flew out from Palau for dinner. Had a very nice dinner in Koror with him. And then we flew out at 3:30 in the morning out of Koror and flew back home to Seattle. All in all, we did quite well for the challenges we were given. We ended up with 29,000 queues, over 10,000 uniques. Our proudest achievement was on 160. We were at almost 1,000 queues. Prior to us going to Palau, there had only been 2 confirmed contacts with the UK. By the time we left, there was over 30 on 160. So we were very happy with that. And there's more to the story, but I know I'm running short on time, Jay, so I can go, okay. Okay, so I mentioned Brian being a developer with WSJTX, and the nice thing about him being able to remote in and operate with as a Fox, he was able to identify some problems with the software, particularly with the streams. Sometimes running as a Fox, if you set your machine to 3 streams and you've got a queue full of people, it would only be taking 2 at a time. So he went through after our expedition and fixed that and increased the throughput by about 30%, which was huge. He also made some changes to the Fox's ability to see what's going on with the queue, what's going on with the processing. He also improved queue management for the Fox, which is huge. They're working on some unique messaging for the Fox to the Hound. And one other thing that he's working on is some security measures so that we as Hounds can go back and verify that we actually worked a proper Fox and not a pirate. So that's something that is hopefully coming, and it has to do with security codes that WSJTX is going to fire out that we'll be able to write down and then go to the DXpedition's website, and they'll publish those numbers based on time date stamp, so you can actually verify before it gets uploaded into a log someplace. So if you're waiting for a log to make the contact, at least now you know that you've worked a true expedition. So. Anybody have any questions? I'll be here to, yes. What's that? Well, we probably could have done that. Yeah, we had a local trying to steal it from us, so that's how he wanted to rent it from us. Yes, sir. So we had 3 amplifiers on site with us. We had a Flex amplifier, we had a Gemini DX 1200 on site with us, and the KPA 500. Now the KPA 500 after the storm no longer wanted to work. Got some moisture in there. We got back, sent it to Elecraft, and Elecraft opened up, looked at it, and said there's nothing wrong with it. So it dried out enough for when they got it on their bench. The DX 1200 we actually had to rewire from 220 to 110. Which was just opening the chassis and changing the fuses. So that's why we were able to still use that. For Logbook of the World for us, did you go through the OQRS with Tim M0URX? Yeah, it's a 5 for anything you worked us. Okay. All right.
You were talking many times that you had to pay for this and that. How much did you overrun your budget?
So our additional, so he was asking, with all the things that we had to rent or purchase, how much over our budget did we go? Just for our stay on Palau, not counting the shipping. Shipping was different. It was an extra $3,000, $3,500 of a cost that we paid to Arlene and McKinley for all these things. Our shipping costs, one thing we've learned for future is if we ship by ocean-going vessel, we're going to get a quote for both directions. We had a quote for getting there. We did not have a quote for coming back, and our return costs were double what it was to ship there. So.
When the typhoon came, was that mostly fresh rainwater or salt water?
Fortunately, it was mostly fresh. I'm sure there was some salt in there. I mean, we were right up off the ocean, but it was fresh water hitting our equipment. When we got our equipment back about a month ago, we were a little concerned about how some of it might have fared because it put it away damp, but it was actually in really good condition. I think we threw away 2 seat cushions when we went back through it. So our equipment fared very well. All right, well, thank you for your time.